Welcome to Sound Bites, hosted by registered dietitian nutritionist Melissa Joy Dobbins.
Hello, and welcome back to the Sound Bites podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Joy Dobbins, a registered dietitian nutritionist. And on the show, we delve into the science, the psychology, and the strategies behind good food and nutrition. And today's episode is all about trends with snacking and sweets. So we've got a little bit of appetizer for you here, if you will. My guest today is Mindy Hermann. She's a registered dietitian nutritionist with an MBA, and she provides food and nutrition communication services targeting food companies, trade organizations, and health professionals. And she writes a series of trends reports for a global market research firm, Innova Market Insights. Welcome to the show, Mindy.
Thanks, Melissa. Thrilled to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you on. I always enjoy getting a few moments with you at a conference, or sometimes we get to talk over lunch or we sit next to each other. I always enjoy hearing about the work that you do and the things that you're interested in. It's always really thought-provoking. So I'm really excited to finally have you on the podcast. And I would love for you to share a little bit with our listeners about your background and maybe what got you interested in nutrition, or some of the work that you've done in your career, and of course, what you're working on right now.
Sure, thanks. When I was a teenager, I was pretty obedient, and I thought, well, I'd better decide what I want to study in college and what I want to be when I grow up. And I thought, well, I like to cook, even though I was a horrible cook back then, and I'm really good in math. So I put food and math together and said, I should be a dietitian. And then my route to becoming a dietitian was a little bit fortuitous because the college I went to, UCLA, didn't have a nutrition program at the undergrad level. So I was going to take a graduate level nutrition class and then transfer. And I found out that they had this really tiny coordinated undergraduate dietetics program that happened to have one seat left. And so I applied, and 2 months later, I was on my way to being a dietitian.
Wow.
So that was very cool. Very lucky. And it was a great education.
Now, you said UCLA. Now, I know you live on the East Coast now. Did you grow up on the West Coast?
Yeah, I grew up in Orange County, California.
Okay.
But I never really felt like that was home. So when I was even just a little tyke, I said to my folks, as soon as I'm old enough, I got to get out of here. So about a year after college, I moved to New York. And I haven't left. I love it here.
Yeah. I wouldn't have guessed that you grew up in California. I don't know.
Yeah, no. Well, that's why I live in New York. So anyway, if we kind of fast forwards, I started out my career in nutrition support at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City. And I had a very science-based, very technical job on the nutrition support service, making TPN solutions, making tube feedings for cancer patients and other outpatients. And Memorial Sloan Kettering was kind enough to pay for my master's degree. And I ended up getting a master's degree in business administration because I thought, well, it would give me more possibilities career-wise than a master's in nutrition. After I got my degree, I asked the hospital if I could be an administrator, and they said, no, you're a dietitian. So I decided to use some of my writing and communications talents and kind of forge out on my own when I had kids. And that's what I've been doing ever since. So I've been working on a combination of freelance writing for magazines, writing for food companies, and really geeking out on market research, which is what I love the most.
I love that because I don't know if I use the term on the podcast, but I talk about it off the podcast where I geek out on my guests, since I think it's a great thing. Like if you're geeking out on market insights and consumer insights, I just think it's so cool. And I know that you are really good at writing. So I follow your articles, and I know you write for a lot of publications that I don't even read, with trade organizations and everything, but I just always learn so much from you. So again, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for coming on and talking with us about trends in the sweets and snacking category. It's not something that I know much about, but as you said earlier, geeking out on consumer insights and market insights, I just find it fascinating. So I'm really interested to hear what you have to share with us. I've done a little bit of reading and research on kind of the trends over the past year. I know we're going to talk about what you've seen in your world over the past year, and kind of maybe as we're wrapping up, we can take a sneak peek into what we're seeing on the horizon for 2020. So where would you like to start?
Most of the stuff we'll be talking about today is about products, and Innova does a lot of research on CPG, or consumer packaged goods, on the shelf of supermarkets, and increasingly available online. But let's start first with just a little look at who we're talking about, because it's really interesting to see why different age demographics snack and what they're looking for. So an Innova Consumer Lifestyle and Attitudes Survey in 2018 found that 2/3 of millennials are replacing meals with snacks because they say they're too busy to eat. And that's been, very much an enduring trend of this kind of snackification of meals, where there's a blurring of the lines between what people are eating for meals and what they're eating for snacks. So we see with these millennials that they just don't have time to sit down for lunch. So they would rather grab something, and increasingly that something is more substantial than just, say, a bag of chips. If we move up to Gen X, so that's folks, approximately in their mid-40s to mid-50s, well, they're starting to hear the health bells ringing. So half of Gen Xers who were surveyed said, I'm inclined to cut down on how many sweet snacks I'm having. They're probably not as active as they used to be, maybe starting to gain weight, and thinking, I really need to get the most out of every bite, and eating a lot of sweet snacks is empty calories. So then we move up to the boomers, ranging in age from late 50s into the 70s, and about 2/3 of boomers say they're making changes to their diet to become healthier. So all of a sudden, here's this group that really, I'm a boomer, and truly, we think we're going to live forever. But all of a sudden, boomers are realizing that they took their health for granted, and it's time to start changing the way they're eating. So in trying to make their diet healthier, they're also looking for healthier snacks. So really, if you ask the question, like, who's driving the bus here? Is it the food companies coming up with snack ideas, or is it consumers demanding things of food companies? And I think probably they take turns driving. That food companies come up with great ideas, but it's the consumer saying, hey, there's a hole here, I'm looking for X, and it's not available. And then there's a food company to step in.
Yeah, then the innovation comes in, which we're going to talk about. That's an interesting question, because companies can only make foods that consumers demand. And, I've heard a lot about, everything's about the millennials, but as a Gen Xer myself, and you're a boomer, we do have a lot of buying power. And it seems like companies nowadays are realizing that there's a lot of different voices, or a lot of different needs, a lot of different groups, and maybe a variety of, their portfolio of products that can meet a variety of needs.
Sure. They're having to broaden out. But it's interesting because when I wrote for magazines, the sweet spot in terms of who the magazines were trying to reach was the consumer, say, 25 to 49. And if you look at television statistics, that's the key group that TV programming and advertising is trying to reach. But I think you're absolutely right that there's much more diversification, and a lot of it's being driven by small companies. The big guys are like the big boat, and it takes them a lot of time to navigate the waters, but the small guys are so much more nimble. So a lot of the great ideas for snacks and the response to the need for healthier snacks is coming from the small companies.
Right. And I'm glad you pointed that out, because I think a lot of times there is this sort of gap, or, misunderstanding or unclear idea about big versus small. And innovation is something that involves a lot of creativity. And like you said, if it takes too long, you've kind of missed that opportunity. So with the bigger companies, you're saying like it takes a long time for them to kind of steer the boat and turn it around. Where the smaller companies are more nimble, they can kind of try different things out, do some consumer market testing and get some feedback and put something out there. I recently did an episode with Jack Bobo, who talked about why people want innovation from small companies versus big companies, aside from the aspect that you brought up where the smaller companies are more nimble, they can kind of do this more quickly and we can kind of stay on top of it. But Jack was talking about how when consumers see change, we're not so excited about change sometimes. We do want some change, but change is still hard. And when we see change, we tend to trust it from smaller companies versus bigger companies, just from the pure scale aspect. Like a smaller company, I feel more like it aligns more with my values. But with this bigger company, how can I be sure that every person in this company aligns with my values? Which, of course, that's just a consumer perception.
Sure.
And that's what we talked about. I believe that was episode 132, if people want to check that out. So talk to me more about small companies or innovation itself and the creativity that goes through, like from the manufacturer lens. There's a lot of pieces in this puzzle. How does this come about? And it takes time and energy.
So, of course, always the start is a good idea. And what's interesting about today's food world is that a lot of the innovation is being funded either by venture capital or private investment or by innovation think tanks at the big companies themselves. You and I have a colleague, and she has come up with a probiotic, prebiotic product. I think she's just come out with a cookie. Mm-hmm. And she kind of scraped together and put together that product all on her own. But then she convinced Mindys to start an incubator and have her as kind of the inaugural member in the incubator. So for a lot of the big companies, it's too expensive and it's too risky for them to have the good idea and then dedicate the machinery to doing it. So they would rather align with, fund, or even buy a smaller company. But increasingly, you'll see that these smaller companies are continuing to operate as smaller companies. So you don't necessarily know that a small company is aligned with a big company.
Right. And even if they're not officially aligned, and part of that bigger company, we're starting to see big food and small food collaborating and coming together in think tank type situations. I know I've been in some of those conversations, and how each side of that continuum can help each other with their limitations and their advantages and their strengths. So that's really exciting, because innovation is important, not just to keep us, what's new, and we talk about trends or whatever, but to keep moving forward with health and wellness options. And, we're going to talk about sustainability a little bit, I think. Innovation is really a key piece of the puzzle to be at the table to help us with some of the solutions that we need moving forward.
I have a story to tell about a snack that was one of my favorite snacks conceptually. It wasn't a snack that I purchased, but it ticked off so many boxes in terms of trends and positioning. So it was a chip, and I don't know if you're familiar with it. It was called Yappa, Yappah. And it was the first product to come out of the incubator set up by Tyson Foods. What a lot of companies do is they start an incubator program and they bring in small companies to have incubator training, and then they mentor the founders of these small companies. But Yappa was actually from an incubator at Tyson that was made up of Tyson employees. And the engineer who came up with this product, which is a chip, said, well, we have a lot of chicken trimmings at Tyson because we trim chicken breast for packaging. We also have access to a lot of fruit and vegetable, not necessarily waste, but fruit and vegetable products. What if we made a chip from the chicken trimmings and the fruit and vegetable waste. So we cut down on food waste. It was in a recyclable container. It was a high protein chip. So it satisfied people on paleo or people looking to eat more protein. And I think that it also included spent grains from beer production. Mm-hmm. So there's another trend of upcycling. And this was like just the most brilliant product in my opinion. But Tyson just announced a couple of weeks ago that it was discontinuing production. So here you have a great idea that has protein, that reduces food waste, that has upcycling. It's in a recyclable container, and it just didn't make it.
Were you able to ever taste it?
I'm not a meat eater, so it wasn't a product that I tasted.
But you thought from a dietitian standpoint,
From a marketing and from a nutrition standpoint, I thought I was brilliant. Mm-hmm. And I was really sad to see that it was discontinued.
It just didn't take off, or they just weren't willing to go the extra mile to see?
Hard to know. For a lot of snacks too, especially the more innovative snacks, they get to a price point where consumers say, I don't know. Am I willing to pay X for this, or would I rather pay less for something else?
Yeah. I think timing is also a key. And some things are just ahead of their time. And then if they were released later or the second time around, it's a big hit. But that's just my 2 cents. You talked about upcycled ingredients, and you talked about incubators. Maybe we should share some definitions of some of these terms with the listeners. Upcycled is a newer term in my vocabulary, and I'd love to hear about how upcycled ingredients are being used in snacks. And also, maybe some of the plant-based movement I know is really driving a lot in the sweets and snacks category. So let's talk about that.
Sure. Okay, so we'll start with upcycling. In food production and also in farming and food growing, there are a lot of waste products created that are edible. Sometimes they go to animal feed, sometimes they're composted. But what a lot of companies are doing now is they are finding a market for their waste products so that the products can be used in something else. One of the first products to do this, and they got venture capital money to do it, is a product called Regrained. And it's a granola bar. And the packaging says Regrained, eat beer, because the grain that's in Regrained is upcycled brewer's malt from craft breweries. That's just really interesting to take this. With all the craft breweries, you can imagine there's a lot of brewer's malt that otherwise would be, either thrown away or composted or maybe put into animal feed. And now it's being used in another product. And I was at IFT, the Institute of Food Technologists, meeting this year, and there was actually a booth, and it was a booth by a broker. And this broker said, we'll find a marketplace for your waste ingredients. So they were actually like an upcycling broker looking for places for people, for companies to take their waste products and convert them into other products.
And we're seeing a lot of that more recently with companies, manufacturers, looking at the whole food waste situation. And so it's really great to see people kind of connecting the dots, as I like to say, between food waste and sustainability and climate change, greenhouse gases, and so on.
Sure.
Because I think that's kind of a newer concept for a lot of people. They just used to think, well, I want to cut down on food waste because that'll save me money. And I'm wasting nutrients by just throwing them in the garbage. But now that we kind of come full circle with, oh yeah, and it's bad for the environment, I think there's an increased, shift in thinking about that. So it's really great to see more innovation with companies about upcycled ingredients and looking at food waste. What else are you seeing there?
You can kind of think of this, just to stay on the upcycling for a second, you can kind of think of this as like the polar fleece jacket of the food supply, because a lot of polar fleece jackets are made from recycled and repurposed soda bottles. So this is taking, something else in the waste stream. And just an aside also on environmental concerns. So Innova surveyed consumers in the US, UK, China, Brazil, France, and Germany. And when they asked consumers, what's your biggest social and environmental concern regarding the brands that you buy, waste and pollution was named by about half, along with sustainability of the planet. And then about 4 in 10 consumers said they were concerned about environmental impact. So you're right that there's definitely concern about this big picture of what we're doing with our world. And the sensitivities vary a little bit depending on the age of the consumer. But I think it's fair to say that, people are concerned about food waste and they are concerned about taking good care of the planet. So they're thinking, what products can I buy or what snacks can I have that are good for me, but also have a good narrative in terms of the earth?
Great. And that makes me think of packaging. I don't know how much you can speak to packaging, sustainable packaging, ethical packaging claims. I feel like, everybody wants to know what they can do. And that's one of the reasons I think I'm so happy to see that the food waste is now more of a purview, because that's something that we all can take action on in a variety of ways. But I feel like the packaging, to me, it feels like the next big thing. So are you seeing anything there that you can share with us?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Packaging is huge. Innova does a lot of work with packaging. It's not where my sweet spot is. But I think that going forward, you're going to see a lot more recyclable packaging, reusable packaging. One of the things that we're seeing in snacks, and who knows if it's, a good trend or not, is this reduction in single-use plastics. So you're seeing more pouches, for example, in candies. So rather than the single-serving bags, or in addition to single-serving bags, somebody can go to the store and buy, say, M&Ms in a resealable pouch.
Like in bulk?
Yeah, almost in bulk, so that they can, have some now and have some later. But there are some older studies that say that, the bigger the package, the more people eat. So we might be solving one issue and feeding another one.
Oh, that is such a good point. I love stuff like that, where it's like, okay, here's the solution. And then it's like, oh, the unintended consequence of that could be X, Y, Z.
There's more interest again. They keep coming, bulk bins, keep coming and going. And I think I saw something that one of our colleagues wrote, and it said, like, the 10 things dietitians who are concerned about food safety say they'll never do. And one of them was buy something from a bulk bin.
Ah, really?
But there's a lot more kind of acceptance again of bulk bins and people bringing their own bottles and jars and filling them up. There's more cardboard. I think you'll start seeing more paper and cardboard.
Yeah, I was on the Alliance for Food and Farming tour in Monterey in August, and you know how you normally see the clamshell type plastic container for strawberries? They are piloting a cardboard container, and it was really exciting to see that.
So cool.
Yeah, but I'm thinking, like, with snacks, it's almost like the packaging and the convenience aspect are almost in, I don't want to say opposition of each other, but it poses a bit of a quandary.
Sure. And we've got a consumer who really wants to just be able to grab something and go.
On the go.
And if you look back to that millennial consumer who doesn't have time to snack, the millennial consumer is looking for a snack that's more substantial. So I think, if you look at what's happened just in bars, where we've really moved from these sweetened cereal bars to bars that are filled with nuts and seeds, or nut butters, which are huge, because they are a more substantial item for somebody who's grabbing something.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. Packaging is an issue. And then if you look at a lot of plastic bags are recyclable, but with changes in our relationship with some of the countries that were taking our recycled trash, all of a sudden, we've got a lot of recyclables and no place for them to go.
Right. Yeah, I think I saw something about that on 60 Minutes. I think it was 60 Minutes. And so, gosh, it's...
Yeah, so the question is, are you going to, on a Sunday night, make up a batch of nut and seed bars and then cut them into portions, wrap them in wax paper or brown paper, and put them in a stack, and then take those as your snack bars over the course of the week? A great idea. I don't know that a lot of people are going to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. There are trade-offs. We used to talk about the trade-offs with price and convenience and time, but now we're looking at the packaging too. And as you're saying, the snacks are evolving. They've changed from a snack to like almost a mini meal. So do you want to speak more about that and what you're seeing? Like you said, more protein, nuts, nut butters, more substantial snacks to fuel people through, instead of maybe a breakfast, lunch, dinner sort of a day, to fuel them through their day.
Yeah, they are. I mean, absolutely, snacks are becoming more substantial, and nuts is just really one of the key areas where we see so much change in snacks with a lot of nut butters. But one of the issues is that nut allergies are also very real. So there are a lot of other things kind of sneaking into the snack arena. I was at a conference and one of the companies had watermelon seed butter.
What?
Yeah, watermelon seed butter. And you'll see pumpkin seed butter because they don't have the same incidence of allergies as peanut butter does.
Oh.
And you'll see bean butters made from, soybeans, although there are enough people allergic to soy. Seed butters and seeds in bars, but sesame probably in the next short while is going to be named the 9th allergen in the United States. And what's interesting is that there used to not be that much sesame in our food supply, but now with such emphasis on Mediterranean, Middle Eastern foods.
Ethnic and global flavors.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot more sesame. And so then we're seeing a lot more allergy to sesame that was probably lying dormant until we saw all these sesame products in the marketplace.
Oh, interesting. And I love that flavor. Speaking of flavors, there's this whole discovery of new flavors. We talked about like the ethnic and global flavors, but talk to me about like some of maybe the unexpected flavors or temperatures.
Sure.
What's going on in that arena?
The issue of flavors and discovery kind of speaks to the human nature, desire for safe adventure and safe excitement. So what's interesting about the globalization is that it sparks people's curiosity and in a way it allows you to be in the comfort of your own home or office and travel around the world because you get to try all of these different new flavors. And Innova did a survey in 2018 and found that about 2/3 of consumers surveyed said, I love to discover new flavors because it's really safe adventure.
Interesting.
When they were looking at annual growth of snack and sweet launches that had a discovery claim, they found that growth was 17% per year on average over a 5-year period for products that actually on their label say discover. So it really creates excitement. And then if we kind of fast forward to 2020, the number one trend for 2020 is storytelling. Imagine, okay, you have these global flavors and these global ingredients, and you've got the opportunity to tell a story to the consumer. And so that creates excitement, and it creates, if we go back to innovation, it allows small companies to play. There's a lot of telling of the story, and that builds trust so that consumers trust the brands that are coming out with these exciting new products.
Yeah, it creates an experience, and that's what people are valuing more is the actual experience of new experiences. I love the safe adventure.
Yeah, I mean, millennials are kind of poster children for they'd rather do than have.
Yes.
So for them, the whole exploring the world is really exciting. And they're much more open about the foods they eat.
Right.
So my kids are millennials, and it's sometimes I look at that generation and I think, how did that happen? Because that generation definitely was also a fast food generation, but probably like our kids are our close friends. So I think that the kids got to experience so much more also on the restaurant side because they were hanging out with their parents a lot.
Yeah, I've seen that with my kids. Number one, they hang out with us a lot as parents, which I love. And their exposure to different flavors is just exponential compared to what I was exposed to. Yeah, which excites me for them because of the whole experience factor.
It makes traveling to convenience stores and mini marts in other states a lot of fun. Like we used to go and just go through the snacks and the sweets to see what was being promoted someplace else. There's really fun stuff. And we used to go up to Canada, and one of the things we'd do is go to Costco and go to the candy aisle just to see what was going on there. So, you asked me about unexpected. So there's a Skittles product that came out in Canada, and it's called Skittles Sweet Heat. It's sweet like Skittles, but then the flavors are hot. They're called the Sizzling Strawberry, Fiery Watermelon, Blazing Mango. So they give this duality of flavor experiences, and that's actually one of the 2020 trends, is almost for people who can't make up their mind. You can get two things in one. You can get crunchy and smooth together. You can get sweet and spicy. You can get sweet and salty.
Nice.
And there's even a candy bar where half the candy bar has one filling and the other half has a different filling.
Wow. I like that because we like a lot of variety. And I'm glad to hear you say, now I know I'm not the only one. Whenever I travel to different countries, the main souvenir that I bring for my family is the different candy bars that are like at the airport, because I'm like, well, what does this taste like? And we just have fun seeing all the differences and and the packaging even, and the flavors and. Yeah,
and I don't know if your family likes Haribo gummies. Mm-hmm. Those were like my boys' favorites growing up. And so anytime I traveled overseas, it would be like, okay, what's new in Haribo?
Yes.
Because it was always in here, if you look at the product itself, it's a gummy. Right. It's a gummy product, but the colors change. The sourness changes. The shapes change. The flavors change. And it makes it exciting to try.
Yeah, the variety that's available over there that we don't see. Or when you go to like Norway or Scandinavia, you've got all the licorice options. And that's just what they're really into there. So it's fun to explore that. So,
yeah, and different cultures have different preferences. Like I'm looking at a Malaysian chip. So it's called Kuyo Premium Potato Chips with fried egg flavor. That's not anything that we are likely to see in the U.S., but how interesting, that if you just travel a little bit over your border, you just find really, really interesting products.
Well, and it's great that it is becoming more accessible, all these global flavors and the ethnic flavors. It is becoming more mainstream. So that's a really exciting trend over the past, I don't know, maybe decade. That's becoming more and more common. And speaking of new adventures and different experiences, talk to me a little bit about alternative proteins like chickpeas. We've got cricket flour, things that other countries it's kind of normal, but we're sort of adopting some of that in the U.S.
Sure. There are two things going on, two trends that are really fascinating and very enduring. One of them is this fascination with protein. It's an interesting flip in perspective because for a lot of years we were on low fat and people were looking for low carb foods. And now it's really a positive reinforcement that they're looking for snacks with protein. So that's a big trend in this macronutrient flip and change of focus is a trend for 2020. Then there's plant-based. And plant-based has kind of taken the world by storm. It's just fascinating. It started out with dairy milk alternatives. I think that's where we first started seeing like soy milk and almond milk instead of cow's milk.
Well, yeah, it was like soy milk forever. And then all of a sudden it was almonds, cashews, and pea protein and oats. Yeah.
Oats and coconut. And I mean, I'm kind of waiting for the day of reckoning because a lot of and I know we're deviating off of snacks, but a lot of the milk alternatives don't match cow's milk for nutrition.
Right.
What's different about protein in snacks is that the protein-rich snacks often have a better nutrition profile than the types of snacks that they're replacing.
Good point.
Or competing with. So that's kind of interesting. So anyway, there's been just this whole discovery of plant protein, and through dairy alternatives and then through meat alternatives, which was it was a really sleepy category for a long time. And all of a sudden, boom, you've got Beyond Burger and Impossible Burger and a lot of big companies and small companies coming out with plant-based burgers. So I kind of demystified the plant protein and also demystified this concept of plant-based. So there are kind of key proteins that are showing up. Pea protein is huge in snacks. And what's interesting about pea protein and rice protein is that some of the protein kind of came about into the snack supply because it's part of the waste stream.
Yes.
So people were using pea starch, they were using rice starch. Some products have potato protein, some of the meat alternatives. And that came about because there's a big industry in potato starch. So it was like, okay, what do we do with this protein? Rice protein also. Potato and rice proteins aren't necessarily high quality proteins, but they came out of a waste stream. And that's fascinating.
So trying to, again, reduce the food waste.
And then a few years ago, it was the global year of the, I think it was global year of the pulse. So pulses are peas and beans. And I think that in combination with peas kind of showing up in dairy alternatives, I mean, pea protein is just huge and it's hypoallergenic. So a lot of products are coming out made with pea protein so that they can say, well, we have protein, we're higher in protein, and we have this great base. There's also been on and off, there's a backlash against potatoes, most of it unjustified.
Yeah.
But manufacturers are looking for alternates to potato in chips. So peas and beans kind of filled that gap. And now you see a lot of products with pea and bean. And again, with the benefit of their being able to say that they also have protein.
Well, I really like what you pointed out because I don't think I ever thought about it this way, where it was fat-free, low carb, but more protein.
Yeah.
It's a positive message versus a negative one. I never really thought about it that way.
Well, and that's a lot of what's going on kind of in people's health mindset these days also. Like if you think about, when you were young, when I was young, there was a lot of emphasis paid on weight loss and heart health. And those were, at the time, the approach was very restrictionist. And now we have so much more holistic view of health, where we're kind of embracing the body and embracing mental health and physical health and fresh air and a healthy earth.
Just our whole life, not just our food and our weight.
Right. It's changing the way snacks are presenting themselves.
Yeah. Talk to me about that with the mental and the emotional health and maybe the personalization factor.
Sure. A lot of snacks now are coming out with feel good. And there's a whole line of snacks with the word joy.
My middle name.
Happy or joy or fun. And Innova found a 14% average annual increase in products with those feel good claims right on the package.
Wow.
Now, keep in mind, this was pre-CBD.
Oh.
So now with CBD creeping into the snack world, I think you're going to see a lot more CBD and association with calm and well-being, but as well functional ingredients like ashwagandha and floral extracts and other ingredients associated with making people feel good. So the other thing that's interesting, with snacks and well-being is last year when I was at one of the big food shows, I saw a lot of products that said, this is decadent flavor, guilt-free.
Wow.
So there was a lot of the contrast between you can enjoy this, but you can feel okay about having this. And so that was fascinating. And as people look for ways to give themselves permission to feel okay.
Love that.
And ways to be happier and more relaxed. I think these snacks that say, hey, I taste good and I'm good for you. Those two used to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah. And I think the flavor aspect is really been amped up, with these global flavors and unexpected flavors and the things that we were talking about. And how does that work with the personalization? Have you seen anything, maybe it's a generational aspect or just with health and wellness moving more towards personalized diets? Of course, we have the free from labels, but are we kind of getting away from that or getting more towards, here's the information and you can decide if it fits you? There
are a couple things going on. One is consumers increasingly want to feel like a product meets their particular needs. So whether that is, things we approve of or don't approve of. So, paleo, keto, plant-based, vegan, high protein, they want to be able to go to the market and find a snack that speaks to the particular eating plan they're following. So there are a lot of focused, tailored products. But the other thing that's happening is there's increased kind of package pollution with certifications and claims. And because you'll find things that say free from gluten, free from lactose, free from the top 8 allergens, free from trans fat, and, tick, tick, tick down the line so that you can look at that list and say, oh, that's me. I'm that guy. But there's also customization of snacks. And I remember a couple times I've seen a company and I tried to look it up before we started talking and couldn't find it. But it was a company that looked at a person's health profile and then customized a nut mix. And so you could order the nut mix for your own profile and the company would pre-pack the nuts in bags and then send it to you. And we have a really good friend, and he does that with his medications. He contacts a company, and they take all of his prescriptions and then pack it up into single packs for every day. And so that's kind of nibbling at the edges of snacking, which is really interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah. The other thing that's happening, it's part of the social media movement, is that companies are allowing consumers to have a say by encouraging their feedback on social media. And they'll even say, look, we're going to vote one of these flavors off the island, and we're going to introduce one of these other flavors. Which should go off and what should go on. So then consumers become vested in picking a flavor that speaks to them.
I love that, because how many times do you find like a product or a flavor? There are still specific products I could name and lament about that I loved, and then they were no longer available. And you're just like, no, I loved that garlic flavored shredded cheese. I can't get it anywhere now.
So my favorite snack of any snack or dessert of anything is tart frozen yogurt. And I keep voting every time a company comes out with sweet flavors is like, where's the tart? But it hasn't gotten me anywhere. So I think I'm in the minority there.
Oh, you'll have to learn how to make it yourself or something.
But, the other thing that's going to be interesting, and I know you and I have been at presentations about nutrigenomics and knowing your genetic makeup kind of vis-a-vis the foods you should be eating and the foods you like. And it'll be interesting to see if, as nutrigenomics evolves, whether food companies will start pairing up with nutrigenomics companies to produce products and snacks for particular gene types.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see where the science is and where then the products and the innovations and development go.
Sure.
Yeah.
What makes it and what doesn't.
Yeah. Exactly. That's at the end of the day, if people are buying it, hopefully it's going to continue. And it reminds me of when General Mills had the Trick cereal and they took all the artificial colors out. And I personally was a little sad about that. And then they had a lot of consumer pushback, and they realized, oh, we have one set of consumers who doesn't want these artificial colors, but we have another set of consumers who's totally fine with them. So they brought the original product back and had both products available. And I love that. I think that's such a great story, because we're not all the same. We don't all want the same things, whether it's a generational thing or a gender thing or just an individual thing. It's nice that there are those options. That's
a really great story on so many levels, because it talks about how people are different and how sometimes the folks who are the most vocal aren't necessarily the core consumers.
Huge. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you want to speak a little bit more to, I know we talked a little bit about how plant-based is kind of going mainstream. I know there's a lot in that category, and I have another recent podcast talking about plant-based and sustainability. But from a snacking point of view, is there anything else you wanted to say regarding that topic?
I think one of the most interesting things going on with plant-based is that plants are being used to replicate the meat experience in snacks, like they're being used to replicate the meat experience in meat. And kind of where that's particularly prominent is in jerkies. So if you look at the jerky marketplace, there are a lot of jerkies made from mango, from coconut, from mushrooms, and they're flavored with meat jerky seasonings. And when they're dried out, they have some of the same texture as meat jerkies. So that's really interesting. Now, they don't give the same benefit in terms of protein as a meat jerky would. So I think if somebody's looking at a jerky as a way to get more protein, they're not going to get that in the plant-based jerky.
Oh, that's a really good point. I've been surprised as I learn more about the plant-based movement is how a lot of these plant-based products are actually geared towards carnivores, meat eaters, and not necessarily vegan or vegetarians. And again, it's just kind of like adding to the variety and adding to the options and adding to our choices. Maybe people aren't necessarily swapping them out completely, but just increasing the variety.
Sure. Another thing that's happening, and I think we didn't talk about this earlier, is kind of how snacks are really migrating to all parts of the supermarket. So there are snacks in the refrigerator case now. When we were talking about meat eaters, it got me thinking about some of the snack packs that have cubes of meat and cubes of cheese and nuts and are really made for the person on a high protein diet where the person's a meat eater. There are also a lot of refrigerated bars now because consumer backlash went against additives and preservatives. So companies came out with preservative and additive-free bars, but then with nothing to help keep their shelf life, they had to move into the refrigerated case. So if you're looking at snacks now, you're not just limited to the snack aisle, but you can look in all different departments.
Excellent. Well, and it sounds like from what you're saying that the good news is that these trends and innovations in the snacks and sweets category can really truly help us fill those nutrient gaps, which is what I think a lot of dietitians think of with regard to snacks when we talk to our patients and clients. Like if you're not a big snacker and you're meeting your nutrient needs, that's fine. If you like to snack, that's fine, but try to get a lot of nutrition in your snacks. So it looks like we're having more opportunities to get some snacks that provide some nutrients.
Sure. So we know that most consumers fall short on the number of fruits and vegetables they eat. And just because a snack has plant-based protein doesn't make it a vegetable.
I love that.
So that's really important for people to keep in mind that, if you're falling short in fruits and vegetables, then what you need is fruits and vegetables.
I love that. Very, very good. Very important point. Plant-based snack does not a vegetable make. Okay. Duly noted. Well, is there anything else about sweets and snacking trends that you wanted to share with us? Because I want to be sure to hear about some of the work that you've been doing and that you have kind of coming up on the horizon.
Sure. So just one last little story about snacks, and then I'm happy to talk about what I'm working on. So there's a big trend in terms of sports nutrition and snacks becoming very big in sports nutrition. And as part of that, fiber is on the rise. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, why is fiber showing up in the sports nutrition market? Because a lot of times, if you're really super active physically, you don't necessarily want a high fiber snack. And I thought maybe it's because sports nutrition has gone so protein heavy. And if you're eating a high protein diet, your diet could be a little on the constipating side. So maybe that's why the fiber is showing up now in protein bars, because it's a way to counteract the effects of having a diet that's really high in protein and a snack that's really high in protein. So just something to think about.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And of course, I love seeing more fiber in products. You mentioned people are not getting enough produce and we're not getting enough fiber. And there's a lot of different kinds of fiber, and there's different types of fiber added to different products, and there's different types of fiber naturally occurring in foods. But that is definitely going to be an interesting trend to watch. And I wonder if that's why we're seeing that and maybe the sports category is just trying to boost their nutrition a little bit more and not just be about protein. But you bring up a good point.
Sure. The other thing is that technology has enabled some of that, because it used to be that fiber was bran, and bran's not so easy to incorporate into snack foods. But now there are a lot of soluble types of fibers that also have a little bit of sweetness, so companies can add them to a product. They increase the sweetness so they can cut back on sugar, and the fiber doesn't bulk up the product like bran does.
Oh, that's really interesting. So the technology has helped
make different types of fibers more available.
Interesting. Well, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing all these insights with us. And, who doesn't love snacks and sweets? So tell us what you're working on now. And I know you just finished up a sustainability leadership program, and you've got some interesting things you're working on.
I'm doing my usual variety of things. I do a fair amount of writing for Today's Dietitian, and I enjoy that because it gives me a chance to do a deep dive into various topics. So I've just finished a piece on lactose-free products, and I'm now transitioning into CBD beverages. So that's an opportunity to really combine what we're seeing in trends with what dietitians are seeing in the marketplace.
Oh, wow.
So I have those 2 articles. And then we're starting to gear up for reports that speak to the 2020 trends that Innova's spotted. So I'm looking forward to kind of diving into new reports and updating reports based on changes in the marketplace.
Excellent. Any sneak peeks you can share with us, or did you weave those into the conversation already?
I wove a lot of them in. I mentioned storytelling. Blends is another big trend. The macronutrient flip is a big trend. Plant-based endures. Beauty. What's really interesting is, we talked a little bit about feel-good products. And we're seeing this blurring of lines between beauty and food. So foods are being packaged in really, really pretty containers and packages. Cosmetics are including food ingredients. So in snacks, I think we're going to just see more products with beauty ingredients. We might start seeing more collagen, for example, in snacks. Because people associate collagen with skin health.
In youth.
Incorrect or correct on that.
Interesting. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And
Thank you.
People can follow you. Your website is Hermann, COMM. So it's Hermann with 2 N's and com with 2 M's.com. And you're on Twitter at Mindy Hermann RD and LinkedIn at M Hermann RD. So I'll have all those links in my show notes at soundbitesrd.com. And if there are any reports or insights that you can share from Innova, I know there's a video and a couple of articles. I'll have those on my show notes as well. So thank you so much for being on the show, Mindy. It's been great having you.
Thank you. It was fun catching up.
And for everybody listening, as always, enjoy your food with health in mind and enjoy your snacks and sweets with future trends in mind. Till next time.
For more information, visit soundbitesrd.com. Music by Dave Burke.